In this video, I'm just going to read this chapter from the Old Testament. One of my friends was doing a Bible study and they brought up some verses from this chapter. And I went and whenever somebody references a part of the Bible that I'm just totally unfamiliar with, I don't find it super helpful to just read the, say, 4 or 5 verses that are being talked about. I have to at least read the whole chapter to get a better idea of what's happening. And oftentimes that's not sufficient. And maybe that's the case this time. Because reading this chapter, this happens all the time with the Bible, where you read a chapter and you're like, whoa, a lot just happened. Slow down, what's going on? And this was one of those chapters, so maybe you're familiar with the stories that happen in this chapter, maybe not. And I have said that I wanted to make more frequent videos, so not every video needs to be something groundbreaking. Sometimes you just need to open the Word and read, and it'll mean something to different people at different times, and it may just inspire. I think it's inspired me to read more of 2 Kings, but then that gets me thinking, well, okay, 2 Kings, do I need to go read the 1st Kings first? Anyways, the Old Testament gets overlooked all the time, but I think we should remember that that's the Bible that Jesus read and loved. So, 2 Kings chapter 4 is what I'm going to be reading. I don't know if I'll have much to say. I mostly just want to read this because let me know if you think this is a cool story from the Bible, if you knew about this before. Now there cried a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets unto Elijah, saying, Thy servant my husband is dead, and thou knowest that thy servant did fear the Lord, and the creditor is come to take unto him my 2 sons to be bondmen. And Elijah said unto her, What shall I do for thee? Tell me, what hast thou in the house? And she said, Thine handmaid hath not anything in the house, save a pot of oil. Then he said, Go, borrow thee vessels abroad of all thy neighbors, even empty vessels, borrow not a few. And when thou art come in, thou shalt shut up the door upon thee and upon thy sons, and shalt pour out into all those vessels, and thou shalt set aside that which is full. So she went from him, and shut the door upon her and upon her sons, who brought the vessels to her, and she poured out. And it came to pass, when the vessels were full, that she said unto her son, Bring me yet a vessel. And he said unto her, There is not a vessel more, and the oil stayed. So clearly this is very reminiscent of Jesus turning water into wine, and Jesus feeding giant multitudes with small amounts of food. So certainly some parallels there. Then she came and told the man of God, and he said, Go, sell the oil, and pay thy debt, and live thou and thy children of the rest. And it fell on a day that Elijah passed to Shunem, where was a great woman, and she constrained him to eat bread. And so it was, that as oft as he passed by, he turned in thither to eat bread. And she said unto her husband, Behold now, I perceive that this is an holy man of God, which passeth by us continually. Let us make a little chamber, I pray thee, on the wall, and let us set for him there a bed, and a table, and a stool, and a candlestick. And it shall be, when he cometh to us, that he shall turn in thither. And it fell on a day that he came thither, and he turned into the chamber, and laid there. And he said to Gehazi his servant, Call this Shunammite. And when he had called her, she stood before him. And he said unto him, Say now unto her, Behold, thou hast been careful for us with all this care. What is to be done for thee? Wouldest thou be spoken for to the king, or to the captain of the host? And she answered, I dwell among mine own people. And he said, What then is to be done for her? And Gehazi answered, Verily she hath no child, and her husband is old. And he said, Call her. And when he had called her, she stood in the door. And he said, About this season, according to the time of life, thou shalt embrace a son. And she said, Nay, my lord, thou man of God, do not lie unto thine handmaid. So obviously we know what she thought was going on there. And the woman conceived and bare a son at that season that Elijah had said unto her, according to the time of life. And when the child was grown, it fell on a day that he went out to his father to the reapers. And he said unto his father, My head, my head. And he said to a lad, Carry him to his mother. And when he had taken him and brought him to his mother, he sat on her knees till noon, and then died. So they're just flash forwarding through this child. She conceived in her old age. That happens at other places in the Bible. God certainly has the power to open and close people's wombs as he pleases, and beyond biology, supernatural opening of women's wombs is something that God has the ability to do. I mean, there's thousands of medical stories out there where, against all odds, medical miracle. It's not a medical miracle. It's supernatural healing by God or angels or whoever God allows to heal. People on earth can heal too. Right? God does give certain individuals power to heal people supernaturally. Anyways, interesting about the head. Like, was he having a terrible headache? What was going on? My head, and he said to a lad, carry him to his mother. And when he had taken him and brought him to his mother, he sat on her knees till noon, and then died. And she went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, and shut the door upon him, and went out. And she called unto her husband, and said, send me, I pray thee, one of the young men, and one of the asses, that I may run to the man of God, and come again. And he said, wherefore wilt thou go to him today? It is neither new moon nor Sabbath. And she said, it shall be well. Then she saddled an ass, and said to her servant, drive, and go forward, slack not thy riding for me, except I bid thee. So she went and came unto the man of God to Mount Carmel. And it came to pass, when the man of God saw her far off, that he said to Gehazi his servant, behold, yonder is that Shunammite. Run now, I pray thee, to meet her, and say unto her, is it well with thee? Is it well with thy husband? Is it well with the child? And she answered, it is well. So interesting here, did it say when the child was grown? I don't know how old he was, because when the child was grown, and he's asking about still as a child. I just found that interesting. Verse 27, and when she came to the man of God to the hill, she caught him by the feet. But Gehazi came near to thrust her away. And the man of God said, let her alone, for her soul is vexed within her, and the Lord hath hid it from me, and hath not told me. Then she said, did I desire a son of my Lord? Did I not say, do not deceive me? Then he said to Gehazi, gird up thy loins, and take my staff in thine hand, and go thy way. If thou meet any man, salute him not, and if any salute thee, answer him not again, and lay my staff upon the face of the child. And the mother of the child said, as the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, I will not leave thee. And he arose and followed her. And Gehazi passed on before them, and laid the staff upon the face of the child, but there was neither voice nor hearing. Wherefore he went again to meet him, and told him, saying, the child is not awakened. Well, so I'll just stop here quickly and say, this happens a lot where God gives people instructions, and it's very important that you follow the instructions. It may seem like, why would they say that? Why, if you meet any man, salute him not? But these things are critically important to follow instruction in cases like this. Verse 32, and when Elijah was come into the house, behold, the child was dead, and laid upon his bed. He went in therefore, and shut the door upon them twain, and prayed unto the Lord. And he went up, and lay upon the child, and put his mouth upon his mouth, and his eyes upon his eyes, and his hands upon his hands, and stretched himself upon the child, and the flesh of the child waxed warm. So that seems like a very interesting, I don't think that it's like he's kissing him. It almost reminds me of those like Leonardo da Vinci drawings of the people with all the arms stretched about. Like he just laid his body directly, like a mirror image on top of the dead body. Then he returned and walked in the house to and fro, and went up and stretched himself upon him. And the child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. So it could have been 7. It could have actually been 7 sneezes, but part of the Old Testament and numerology and just understanding symbolism, it could have been that he was just having these crazy, outrageous sneezes. It may not be that he sneezed like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 just represents like power, excess. That these were very intense sneezes. I mean, this person was dead for who knows how long, brought back to life. So they probably had some crazy stuff to get out of their system. But I just think whenever I see something like that, it's interesting. And yeah, God does use symbols to communicate, and through his word, sometimes life is not in such a way where we can really escape using symbolism. And the Old Testament, you can just see that they embrace that it's like a known thing. 7, it means something. It doesn't mean that he sneezed literally 7 times, though it's possible. It's more about the intensity of the situation. And the child opened his eyes, and he called Gehazi and said, "Call this Shunammite." So he called her. And when she was come in unto him, he said, "Take up thy son." Then she went in and fell at his feet, and bowed herself to the ground, and took up her son, and went out. And Elisha came again to Gilgal, and there was a dearth in the land, and the sons of the prophets were sitting before him. And he said unto her servant, "Set on the great pot, and seethe pottage for the sons of the prophets." And one went out unto the field, one out into the field to gather herbs, and found a wild vine, and gathered thereof wild gourds his lapful, and came and shred them into the pot of pottage, for they knew them not. So this is, I actually referenced this, and I found this interesting, that, yeah, my friend had a Bible study thing, showed me these verses, and I was like, oh, I'm going to read this whole chapter, and it ended up being a verse that I had just pulled up about in my herbalism video. So here we're getting to that part. Pour out, but he said, wait, verse 40. So they poured out for the men to eat, and it came to pass as they were eating of the pottage that they cried out and said, "O thou man of God, there was death in the pot, and they could not eat thereof." But he said, "Then bring meal," and he cast it into the pot, and he said, "Pour out for the people that they may eat." And there was no harm in the pot. And there came a man from Baal-shalisha, and brought the man of God bread of the firstfruits, 20 loaves of barley, and full ears of corn and the husk thereof. And he said, "Give unto the people that they may eat." And his servitor said, "What should I set this before 100 men? And he said again, "Give the people that they may eat. For thus saith the Lord, they shall eat and shall leave thereof." And he set it before them, and they did eat, and left thereof, according to the word of the Lord. So, very interesting chapter, multiple instances of physical objects being replicated, duplicated in real time. There's this really interesting mathematical theorem. It's, for some reason, Banach-Tarski paradox is coming to mind. I don't think that's it. Maybe not. I don't know. There's an idea. There's this mathematical theorem where you can take a single object, a mathematical object, and break it up in this such a strange way, and then put it back together so that you have 2 of that same object. There's just like these way out there mathematical theorems that are like, oh yeah, it's possible to replicate matter. That's just where my mind goes to when it's stuff like this. That God could actually be doing things in physical ways. Not that he needs to, but it's just something my mind goes to whenever this happens. Anyways, that's it for this video. God bless everyone.